Hey, this is Madalyn Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. Normally, we start our space talking about spaces because that's where we are. But this week, there's not that much going on with spaces.
We don't have spaces news. There's like nothing for the week. I don't remember the last time something like this happened, Suze, where we don't even have one piece of news from Twitter, from X, whatever you want to call it, that is specifically about spaces. I mean, there's been some conversation of, now you can upload up to 3 hours of video. If you're a premium subscriber, you got the blue check mark. Little things like this have been coming through in the past week, but nothing on spaces. Do you think it's because right now Clubhouse is in the limelight because so much is going on over there?
Yeah, I really think it might be that, because over the last few weeks, we have heard odds and ends of things that have been happening. They've been working on desktop spaces. We've had week after week, Legion has updated his thread and we have been following that. We've, spoken about the different things that they're adding there. They added the chat. We talked about that last week. And really this week, there doesn't seem to be anything obvious that they're either working on or not that they're telling us about. And I do wonder if that is kind of in response to the fact that if you're into social audio at the moment, you are more than likely talking about Clubhouse as our title for today would suggest. So our space title for today, for those listening to the podcast, is Clubhouse Async Chat. Great idea or no thank you. And we expected that we would be talking a lot about Clubhouse today, and that is our intention. But to not have anything from X at all about spaces does feel a little bit odd. But, maybe it is just a response to the fact that everyone's thoughts are elsewhere if they're interested in this social audio space, right?
Right. One thing I did hear about this week, Elon is planning to release the entire algorithm of X so that they've given us bits and pieces so that people that are smart can go through the code and decipher what that means for the rest of us. Things like the power of comments, replies on a post versus a like. And then you as the author of a post replying to posts and going back and forth, having these conversations in your post is so much more valuable than just trying to get people to like what you're putting out. And so otherwise it's just not much. It's really just some strategy stuff. It's not directly related to spaces, just for overall strategizing stuff that's good to know about. But I'm really excited that they're going to be more transparent with the algorithm, and maybe there'll be some information in there about spaces. We'll have to keep an eye out for that. But we got Clubhouse news to talk about, so we'll just share, what's been going on with Clubhouse. And I can't wait to hear from our listeners here, especially those that have been dabbling. If you're like me and you haven't used Clubhouse for a while and you're like, okay, I got to go check out this new thing with chats. I've been kind of back into dabbling over there. And I can't wait to talk about this, Suze, because I'm finding these changes really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so for anyone who doesn't know, last Wednesday, actually just before All Things Audio went live over here on X, Clubhouse announced the update that us in the social audio world have been listening for and waiting for, that they were updating the app with this complete facelift. They were doing something completely new. They said it's something that we wouldn't have seen before or heard before. And everyone had been kind of waiting. We'd been doing a lot of talking around what it might be, lots of guessing games because the devs actually decided to do this part of the build behind closed doors, which was very different to how they've been building it before that. Michael's tweet that's up in the nest at the moment actually says it all. So 156 days, April the 4th, 2023. That's at least how long Clubhouse staff have been using the new chats features. They've been using it that long. That's how long we probably haven't heard from them, to be fair. So yeah, interesting stuff. They've released this chats feature, which this time last week we knew very little about other than a blog that had been released by founder Paul Davidson. And there had been a kind of introductory founders chat going on over on Clubhouse. But we'd only just gone live, right, Madalyn? So we were really trying to pick up what this thing was while we were talking about it, yeah?
Yeah, it was quite interesting because this announcement came, like, I think within an hour of us going live last week. So we were just trying to figure out what's going on over there, reading a bunch of these tweets, these posts from others that are checking it out and explaining what they're seeing over there. And this has given us a week to test it out. We mentioned last week when we closed out this space, like, let's all take some time to go over to Clubhouse and try the new feature and see what we think so we could talk about it today. So yeah, it's interesting that, like, it took this long to, like, really start hearing from them and what they're working on that that makes the platform so useful.
I mean, they clearly knew what they were going to dive into. If they've been testing this and building this and working on it since April, the reason he knows that it's that long ago is that once the chats feature went live, a previous card showing a chat showed that it had been started 156 days ago. So that's where the number has come from, and is the thought behind, well, that's how long they've known what they've been trying to get out into the public, and they've been tweaking it and working on it and stuff like that. So interesting that they've managed to keep that to themselves all this time. So for anyone who hasn't been over to Clubhouse since the new update, Chats is an asynchronous voice messaging type feature. I say it's a feature. It is now the central thing that the Clubhouse app focuses on once you're in there. You record a voice note, essentially, that you can then choose whether that goes to just your friends. They don't have followers anymore. They are now language change. It's now friends. It can either go to your friends. It can go to friends of friends. You can kind of choose the privacy setting, if you like. So you record your voice note, you send it out there, and then people respond to it in their own time. So they'll be able to go into the app, listen to what you've recorded, and then record their own response if they want to. And again, they can choose who that goes to, thereby extending whether or not you might then see someone else that's interested in what you're talking about. You might want to make them one of your friends. So that's how you'll sort of expand the network, if that makes sense. Now, it appears on the screen a bit like stories. So if you're used to Instagram and you've got lots of stories on one person's account on their profile that you're looking at, it'll appear across the top like a kind of bar of this is how many photos you've got to go through if you're going to swipe. And it appears like that. So the number of messages is kind of shown to you visually in that sort of top bar. And the length of them sort of shown there as well. I think you get a minute each time to record a message. You're not completely cut off though, because if you're still talking, it will just flick you over into the next minute and the next minute. Or you might just leave a message that's just a few seconds long as well. So that will show in the length of the line at the top of your screen. It's a really interesting concept. At first, I wasn't quite sure about it. But I have to admit, I've used it a little bit more over the last couple of days, and I quite like it. I'm quite getting used to the fact that I'm having a conversation with lots of different people and actually finding new friends that I hadn't found before, and that I can go back to it when I've got time to listen through to what they've said and add my own thoughts. I feel like there's a lot they could do with it. There are a few tweaks, not least of all the fact I would like to be able to minimize the screen or like leave the app and still have it play. It cuts off, basically. It pauses where you're listening, but it doesn't continue to play if you're anywhere else in the app or on your phone. So I feel like I would like that to happen. But yeah, it's been very interesting to play around with. And yeah, have you managed to get over there yet, Madalyn?
I have, and I have to say, I really like this. I like having conversation in this manner where it's asynchronous because, look, let's face it, we're all busy people. I think it's hard to get people to come somewhere live for a conversation. I mean, we do it here in Spaces every week. I do it multiple times a week with all the various spaces I'm hosting and co-hosting. But we're, relying on people to come live for the conversation and people listening to the replay. But what's great about this new Clubhouse chat feature is that I can just have all kinds of interesting conversations and listen to people. They're short snippets, and it's when it's convenient for you. So like, for instance, this morning, Suze, I saw yours in there. You did a really cool one. You started off saying, what made you smile today? And I love that. I was out walking my dog and I saw this. I'm like, ooh, this is a really good one. And I was listening to your thoughts and your friends that jumped in, and I jumped in and made a few thoughts in there as well of like, what's making me smile today? And what an interesting way to utilize it to bring people together, have interesting conversations. I love that it'll show you friends of friends in the feed. And I'm just connecting with a lot of interesting people right now. So I'm excited about this. I like this feature a lot.
Yeah, I really have enjoyed playing about with it, and I didn't think I would, I have to admit. So I had a few thoughts at the end of last week. I put my Substack together, Stop, Rewind, Play, and I wrote in there about the new Clubhouse update. And one of the things that I wrote about there was that, this is really leaning on short form audio, short form content, very in and out, very quick, reactive type audio, which is very different to the live audio rooms, almost like that's more of an event nowadays. If you think about like the liveness of it being an event, but the kind of drop-in version being the chat. And I kind of thought a little bit about the fact that potentially I didn't get it instantly because I'm not the target audience that maybe Clubhouse is going for anymore. So, we spoke about Clubhouse launched and got big during the pandemic, and certainly us millennials, parents, carers, all the rest of us looking for other people other than those who lived in our house to talk to when we were all in lockdown. We went to this app and we loved it. And, we found the conversation and the connection that we needed. Now in a post-pandemic world, it really feels like the developers over at Clubhouse are thinking about how they future-proof this in a world where everyone can go out and have a normal conversation in a way that they couldn't when they were launched. And to do that, I think they're thinking about who will their audience be in a few years' time and what are that audience looking at the moment. Now, that audience will be the Gen Zers and the alphas even, and they are all into this short form content, right? They're on TikTok, they're still on Snapchat, they're using voice notes over in WhatsApp. They're literally typing one word to each other and having a conversation via text. Sentences do not exist in my 13-year-old's world. So I felt like this was potentially a gear change, a complete feature change and an app do-over that is really targeted to a much younger audience, and potentially that's why I didn't get it. Having used it for a few days, I have now got it, but it's just taken me probably longer than it would take my teenager to get it. What do you think of that, Madalyn?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that it does seem like this really does appeal to the younger audience, and that because, yes, they like doing very short form little snippets. I remember when my son was younger, and it's like, why does he text so much? You get your bill and it shows you like how many texts you did in a month. I'm like, how do they this? I realize, yes, they do little like one word or like a short sentence, not like us adults with longer things in our text. And so I can totally see where this would be very appealing to a younger audience, but I find it appealing. I really like this feature a lot. And I tell you what, this is going to get me to use Clubhouse a lot more. Whereas I was to the point where I rarely logged in. I would go months and months without going over there because I just would rather spend my time here in Spaces in this type of environment. But I just love that ability, short form, asynchronous, and having interesting conversations. And I'm just trying to think about how can I use this on the business side. So far, I'm just kind of doing it more on the personal. Let's just converse with people and make it about just talking to people, not what kind of tips can I share and help them use Twitter or X better, which is usually how my mind works. So yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities here.
Yeah. And I mean, they were saying about not wanting this to be, big broadcasty, big showy type content that people are creating anymore. And obviously when we were thinking almost, from a business perspective around social audio and around creating rooms and even spaces, you can see that there are hooks there if businesses want to promote themselves that way or, sponsors, all that kind of things, the monetization idea of it. Whether that will happen over there in this realm, in this kind of iteration of what they're doing, I don't know. And how it will happen, I don't know. But it's interesting. Maybe they'll add the tipping back in. We've had tipping over here. I know that's something that you'd be keen to see sorted out over here on X, really, for the social audio and the video stuff that they're doing, right? So maybe that's something we might see over there as a monetization model. I'm fairly sure it will have to have one somewhere along the line, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that turns into and how that evolves. I've invited Morgan up because I know Morgan has spent a long time on Clubhouse since we last spoke last week. So I really want to kind of throw over to you, Morgan, and just say, what I know you know a lot of people over on Clubhouse who have been on there historically, who've been there since the start, people that have left, all that kind of thing. What's the general vibe, do you think, from people that are using Clubhouse at the moment in this new way?
So broadly, I'm seeing two things. I think it's quite a polarizing change. There are a lot of people who, like myself, absolutely love live rooms and are kind of worried somewhat that is under threat. I don't think it is under threat, but I think that's a very understandable concern at the moment. The other thing I've seen is this was a really kind of abrupt change. So we were told by the founder that a big change was coming and it was going to be jarring, but no details about what it actually was. And then fairly soon afterwards, the whole thing was released. So I think there was this kind of trying to make sense of it all together. It was quite a bonding moment, actually, in terms of friendship and relationship on the platform. But very quickly, I saw people who use this start to get it. So much like you, it's sort of the first day, it's, my God, what is this? And then by day 3, it's, I've met so many people. There's a lot of potential here. People are being really creative again. I actually love it. So there's been a big swing of opinion, and that's not for everybody. There's still a lot of people, I think, who the polarization is still there. But the general vibe now is one of kind of hopeful people are getting it and enjoying themselves. And like you said, Madalyn, like meeting a lot of people. It's something I've definitely done, that I've been on Clubhouse a lot, as you know, and all of a sudden there are these voices and these faces who are friends with people I know that I've literally never seen or heard on the platform. And I'm getting to know them. I'm even giving them like voice messages. In private voice messages and reaching out and saying hello, and that was great what you said, and then maybe I'll meet them in a live room and we can really talk. So I think what I'm seeing is that it is working. It's just quite a shift for people who are there.
I love everything you said, Morgan. That's a great assessment.
We were told, like Paul Davison said, once this update lands, there's going to be bugs, there's going to be stuff that doesn't work, stuff that you're not keen on, all that kind of thing. They had quite an odd bug this week, didn't they, where people didn't have a button or something, couldn't record.
I actually had this. It was my own fault, really, because I was on iOS 17 public beta, and there's a bug with that because Clubhouse was still working on their own stuff. They hadn't actually tested it against the beta. So I had this really bizarre bug where I couldn't reply to anybody's chat. So I was locked out of an entire conversation that was happening on the platform. And kind of hilariously, without going into the details, it turned out a friend of mine discovered a workaround which involved going to a private room with just one person and talking to them briefly and then doing something. So it became his favorite bug on Clubhouse because it was a bug that actually meant that the only way to solve it was to talk to somebody else. But that was
cunning. I love how you worked that out.
Right. I don't think they planned it that way, but it was quite nice.
And the app's actually drawing a bit on AI, isn't it? In terms of, so you can see an AI produced summary of the audio chat in the hallway. If you press and hold on the title that's been created, again, that's all AI created, isn't it? It gives you a summary and it even updates it, right? I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it gives you a pretty humorous summary of what's going on in the conversation. And because this is an open-ended format, people can keep adding bits to the conversation indefinitely, that as that expands, it'll redo the summary. And they're spookily accurate as well. I mean, some of them are just laugh out loud hilarious, but others are spot on. So it's pretty nice. And it's also pretty nice because compared to the old thing we used to do where we might schedule a room, we'd have to write our own description. And a lot of people maybe don't do it or aren't that good at writing descriptions. And suddenly now we have a reliable description for every conversation that is not live at the moment.
So the other cool thing that I've seen is the real-time captions, which are obviously part of the chat. So when I'm listening back, I can see captioned what I'm hearing at the same time, which is really good. Although I did hear you earlier, Morgan, and your captions were in Welsh. Like, I'm not entirely sure why.
Yeah, so these are some of the bugs. So one of the ambitions here is these captions don't just caption me, but if somebody joins the conversation and speaks Spanish, it should caption it on English for me. And for them, if they're Spanish speaking, they don't understand English, it should caption everything I say for them in Spanish. So the idea is that you can join in the conversation no matter what language you speak. But there are some still odd hiccups. A couple of friends of mine are always transcribed as if they're Welsh. And I got it today too. So maybe I'm, I absolutely love Wales. So it might be a suggestion. But yes, there are kinks to work out across the platform right now. So it's like early adopter phase once again.
I really like the captions when I'm listening in a chat, and it just shows the captions as I go across. I love that I can tap to skip ahead or go backwards. It's very simple to use. I like just casual conversation so far, just my assessment. And then Gary Stockton, who's here with us, put in the chat, the new Clubhouse reminds me of early Anchor. And yes, I remember when Anchor first came out. It's exactly what this is like. Were any of y'all on Anchor in the beginning, where you could do exactly this?
I remember reading about it, but I never used it. Did you, Suze?
Yeah, it was really cool.
I think I did it once, like really early on, but I get what you're saying in terms of how it worked. So yeah, very interesting to see them kind of pick up on this idea of, and as I've said, it's something that's not kind of widely out there. I think once I heard, when we were reading through the blog last week, I was fairly sure, in the early days of social audio, when there were lots of different standalone apps that came along, there was one called Soundwave, which I really, really liked and enjoyed and spent a bit of time on. And I'm fairly sure they were an asynchronous voice message type setup as well. And I think someone could leave a thought and someone else could then reply to it and someone could reply to it, etc., etc. When I went back into that the other day, they've actually updated what they do, and you now can't, I don't think you can respond in quite the same way, but I'm fairly sure they had this sort of idea probably 2 years ago where they were trying to do it. Now, why they drew back from that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what their user base was like or anything like that, but it's certainly an idea other people have tried. Now, the benefit that Clubhouse have got on it, right, is that they did have an awful lot of people download this app in the first place. Do you think, Morgan, that they're going to be able to draw people back that downloaded the app, did that thing where they loved it during lockdown, and then they've gone away and everyone's gone, oh, Clubhouse is dead, etc.? Are they going to look back in to see what's going on in it now if they hear about it? I mean, the other thing is that we're in a bubble, right? Because we're listening out for it. We know it's happened. We're interested in it. But do you think they're going to be able to claw back any of those people that we know have stopped using the app regularly?
So I think some will and some won't. And that's the polarizing thing too. So I already know some, what we call OGs, who've come back and really see the potential and are using it a lot again. And then others who've come back and thought, well, look, I was just here for live and this is not that. So on the other hand, I do think, so it does a few other things. I think probably people who've gone and checked out Clubhouse in the last couple of years have this experience of opening the app and just seeing some rooms in the hallway. You think, oh my God, like, where am I? This is not a place for me. Well, all of that is gone now. So there's a much deeper thing about how the network has changed. Now it's just friends and friends of friends. There's no public surface. There's no like global view of what's going on. You're not going to see anything that you're not connected to by somebody you either trust or consider to be a friend, and then someone on the second hop that they also trust or consider to be a friend. And I think that makes it like a much safer, more like it reflects you and your interest in your people back at you better. It's still got some way to go. Like this is a very early stage of the medium, and people are trying to understand how to do it well. So I'm not going to say that the quality is consistently incredibly high right now, but I do think that there's a better chance that if you go back, you're not going to be put off by some of the things that you might have done earlier. All that said, their big bet here is less about bringing people back who once were users, and it's really about people who've never encountered it before. How can they make that first experience as easy as possible? How can they make it much easier than starting a live room when you haven't got many friends, you don't know how to moderate, nobody comes up on day one? Are there ways they can solve that and mean that you can turn up, you've got a few friends, you make a post, it's lightweight, and very quickly you get a few replies and you think, oh, this is nice. I've heard from a few people. Maybe I've met a new person. If you can do that on day one, then I think it's really about the new users as the most important thing, not people who are returning.
Yeah, and I guess that harks back to what I was saying then, isn't it? About potentially the different target audience, although just to be a new user, you don't necessarily have to be in a different demographic. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, interesting. I definitely would like to see them, update that player so I can listen to other things. What is sort of your top request? What would you like to see? The other thing I'd like to know is how long something is before I start listening to it, because I can't necessarily tell how many responses there are. And even if I did know how many people have responded, I don't know how long I've got to listen before I listen through to the whole thing. So what would you like to see them do to it next?
Well, actually, the one you first mentioned is my top one too. So it's always been a great strength of Clubhouse that it's a layer of audio that can sit across every other app on your phone. You could be somewhere, you could be on Instagram and be listening to a room on Clubhouse. And now, if you're listening to a clip and you close the app, or even if you lock your phone screen, the audio cuts out. So I'd love to see it like I can just sit my phone down and it will play and I can listen. That would be great. Yeah, and I think you mentioned the other big one, that this was obviously tested with a much smaller group of people in the team, and I don't think they had the experience of a viral chat that gets 100 replies in 2 days and suddenly turns into a 1 hour piece of audio. So I know they're working on some ways of making that much easier, where you can very quickly move around that and get a sense of where you should spend attention, or you can go right to the end so you can reply. I think you experience the big problem now is not only do you not know how long it is, in order for you to reply, you can only do that at the very end. So you've got to skip 50 people before you get to the point where you can actually participate. And that's a major issue, but I'm sure that they're really aware of that.
That's why I would like for it to show, how many are in like a thread, whatever they want to call it, in this chat. So how, because that is something I was wondering about when I came into Suze's chat this morning. It's like, well, I wonder how many of these, and do I need to just tapping across so I can go ahead and leave my comment? That would be really helpful to know. It's like how many, how long is the whole thing? Like what you mentioned, Suze. It'll be interesting to see, like, are they going to work on things like that? I'm definitely eager to hear from our listeners what their thoughts are, anyone that's using it. And I did put from the chat into the Nest, Shadows Pub, who's here, put in the chat and said, my only interest on Clubhouse now is the rooms. The chats remind me of voicemail, so 1990s. But see, that's what I'm liking is the chats that is like voicemail. I love using the voice DMs here on X. So I like that they have that. Rather than Clubhouse rooms for me, I'd rather be here in Spaces, which is what I've been doing the last 2.5 years. So I'm thinking it's going to appeal to a broader audience because you're offering more. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think it will too. And I know it's a tired line in a sense, but you mentioned the pandemic. And I do actually think it's really true if you're doing a top level analysis of what happens in social audio. The point when you have everybody at home, maybe they're desperate to talk to somebody who isn't their partner or their kids. They're not, getting dressed up or doing their makeup, and it just really suited that moment. But we have a lot of things that we negotiate with our time now, and I think doing it asynchronously means that we used to say you can multitask while you're doing social audio. You could be doing the cooking while listening to a space. But one of the things you couldn't really do is be with somebody else in real life. You'd have to say, oh, this might take an hour. I'm not sure. It's with people, some strangers on the internet. I don't need to. Should we not explain this? But I think with asynchronous, the fact that you can drop in, listen to a bit, and fire off a reply, and then see what comes in over the next day really suits that. And it means you can now multitask with the rest of your real life too, including the people in it. I might say something for 30 seconds to my phone, but it doesn't mean that I'm not spending the evening with my girlfriend. Whereas being in a space does mean that I have to say, look, I'm in a meeting. So I think that's absolutely right. That makes it much more accessible to many more people. And I hope with that, more people on the platform will also mean more live rooms. It just might mean that there are far more people doing the asynchronous chats. But these things will grow together, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm excited about it. And you guys know I have not been excited about Clubhouse in a very long time. So it's causing me to go back over there and use it. So we shall see.
We also need to say a massive thank you to our sponsor, Zealous.
Yes, we love Zealous, and they are our first official sponsor of this space in our podcast. And, we don't just have anyone be a sponsor. It's a tool we actually use and have been using, right, Suze? Like we love using this to repurpose our content.
Yeah, that's right. So we've been creating some great little audiograms, which I hope anyone over here on X has been seeing on our feeds. And they are really quick and easy to do. Pretty much straight after our space finishes, we can get a transcript of what was said, and we can then highlight the text and create an audiogram in our brand colours within minutes. It's incredible. And then it's out there for everybody to see. Everyone can hear the silly things I've said, like, was it octopus hands or something I said last week? I think that one went down quite well. But yeah, it's making the content creation for the promotion of the space super simple. So anyone who is into spaces should definitely check Zealous out. And you can do that, Madalyn, by going to...
If you go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com, just put /Zealous, Zealous. That'll take you directly over to Zealous, so you can give it a try. We also have a link to it on the website as well.
Well, we'd love to hear from anyone in the space that's got something to say about Clubhouse or anything else about social audio. Sir Major, I see your hand. You've been so patient. You've been over to Clubhouse. What do you think about it? Come and join the conversation.
All right, thank you so much for allowing me on to the space. Yes, I've been on Clubhouse for about 3 years now. I'm one of the, in the urban side of the Clubhouse, we call it, many people may say season one. Well, before there was season one, I was part of the pilot. And so I was on Clubhouse for a long time. I enjoyed Clubhouse initially in the beginning. It got very toxic. I think I played a role in that, to be honest. However, I don't like the new Clubhouse at all. I don't like it. And many of my friends and folks who I engage with, we don't like the new Clubhouse. All of a sudden, Rohan and Paul made these sudden decisions to completely revamp the app. It has been difficult to navigate, not user friendly. And again, a lot of my friends have said, we're going to divest. We're going to divest from Clubhouse, and we're going to merge and migrate over to X here. I love X. I've been a user for X for such a long time, at least about 2 years now. Always been a beta user over here. So for me, I don't like the new features. It is just very difficult to separate an actual room, because before you get to see the individual rooms that were taking place or the individual houses, it is now difficult because it's kind of like merged in with these audio voice recordings.
I mean, that's a good point. I realised earlier that live rooms are still a thing over there, but you have to kind of swipe a certain way to find them, right? And So is there anywhere now like the hallway where you can see what live rooms are going on? Is that a thing?
So for me on my end, when I see it, it's difficult to decipher what's actual a live current room and it's a almost like a chain of audio recordings, pre-recorded or previously recorded chats. So that's kind of difficult for me to be able to figure out. Now, the one feature that I love the most about Clubhouse is being able to have private conversations. As you all may know, that on X, there is no private rooms. There's no private discussions. If I wanted to have a quick chat on the back end, I can't do that on X. On Clubhouse, you're still able to enjoy that feature. And so what we do on here is if I want to have a quick chat or a private chat, because people have the ability to listen to these rooms online and not physically be in the space, and that's kind of challenging and difficult because you almost want to know, your engagement. You want to know who's listening.
I've been wanting spaces to give us the ability to have private conversations utilizing it. The most we can do right now is either record audio in the DMs or use now we've got the voice DMs, which is asynchronous. So it's, really no different than doing Clubhouse, but it's private. The only way you can have a somewhat private space is if you're a creator, you're doing the subscriber feature, and you can do a space just for the subscribers. We were able to do ticketed spaces for a while, but that's no longer available. But I've always advocated for having that ability to have private spaces. I would love to have that. I have not heard any talk about it. So I would be very surprised if we got that here on the X platform. But I really love all your thoughts. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Suze, I find it interesting that it seems like people are either on one side of the features of Clubhouse or the other. It doesn't sound like anybody's excited for both because I don't want to go over there unless I'm just having these nice little asynchronous conversations. I really like that. But otherwise, I'm over the live conversations over there. I have no interest. I haven't for a very long time. So, but it's interesting that it seems like people are divided on this.
Yeah, and I think the first thing that they appeared to be divided on, or that I saw over here on X shortly after the announcement, was this whole friends followers thing. People who were very much, trying to build up a following over there took it really badly, or seemed to take it quite badly, that suddenly their following wasn't a following anymore. They were their friends. Now, I guess that depends on how you had approached building up the people, the group of people that you were building up around you over there, what your intention was for doing that. I mean, if you're a business on social audio, right, you're building a following for a particular reason. You want to promote to people, you want to market to them. And, Clubhouse and Spaces aren't immune from that. So I'm fairly sure, absolutely certain, there are people over there that were, wanting this huge following to do that. Now, of course, the way that they've changed it around, not only they've called it friends, but it now means that your things aren't public anymore, your chats aren't public anymore. They're not reaching just anyone. An algorithm isn't just chucking it in front of someone who might be vaguely interested because they said they were interested in arts when they first set up their Clubhouse account, So I think for a lot of people, they felt cut off and out of that. And it was like, I've built this following and I can't do with it what I'd intended to do because they've changed the entire outlook of the app. It's definitely been divisive and seems very black and very white. People are either, yes, this is great, no, this is terrible. It's definitely an interesting one. Definitely.
It is. But let me tell you, from my long experience in social media, I started teaching people how to use social media all the way back to 2005. We learned a lot of valuable lessons in the early days, meaning that these platforms can leave, they could change, they can do whatever they want. We're getting access to most of these for free or for a very low cost. They really control everything. I mean, back in the MySpace days, did we think MySpace would go away? No, there were millions of us using it every day. I was using it for business. I know most people used it for personal, for fun, but I was actually using it in business, and I never thought in a million years it'd go away, and it did. It went away. And so we can't always control these platforms, their destination, what kind of pivots they're going to do. We just have to roll with it. I wasn't excited about Twitter becoming X. I think it's a terrible name, but we have to accept it. And I know a lot of people still want to call it Twitter and still call it tweets, and I get it. This is a platform that's been around for 17 years. You can't just stop calling it tweets and Twitter. Even Elon was in an interview a few days ago and he said Twitter and tweets. So, it's going to take time, but we also have to know we're getting what we pay for. Like we mostly have access for free to everything. These companies can do whatever they want. So what I found that's useful is maximizing what they let us do. And if you don't want to be on the platform, that's fine. I mean, there's platforms I don't care to use and I don't use them at all. And the ones that work for me, I do spend my time on, and the ones I like being on, but also it's knowing how the algorithm works, how to strategize so you get the most out of it. So the platforms you are using, try to understand all the ins and outs and see how can this benefit you? So I like that I could go over to Clubhouse now and just have these interesting little conversations on my schedule. And I think my new habit is going to be like what I did this morning, Suze, when you had your question of the day. I think every morning when I'm out walking my dog, which is a daily thing I do day in and day out, every single morning, I think I'm going to hop on Clubhouse and just go be a part of different people's conversations and see who all I can meet. And so it's just rolling with what they're giving us. And that's what is appealing to me. And that's probably the only thing I'm going to do on Clubhouse is that one thing. And it's okay. It's okay. We can all use these however we want. Next up, we have Brandon. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, Madalyn, and hey, Suze. Great to meet you, Suze, on Clubhouse. No, I really like you said, Madalyn. I really like the new asynchronous capability where you can just kind of contribute whenever you want. Major's points are well taken. We're not probably going to make any money out of the new platform, but it does at least give us this opportunity to partake in conversation. So what I've said in a few different convos is what I think they're called now, is that it feels like it's an audio version of Reddit in some respects, because you can kind of interact in a conversation at any place, I guess. You could even rewind to the beginning. And it also serves as a potential Quora, I guess, in some respects, in providing answers in an audio format versus, written format. I know Quora tried to do a little bit of video at one point, which I don't think ever really took off, but it does give you this ability. I mean, I literally wanted to hammer away at a bunch of convos asking questions to see what people would do in response, but at the same time, no one's into spam, so I didn't ask more than a couple. But I do feel like there's a huge opportunity there. Now, the question will become, can we search for certain threads or conversations that we might want to be interested around? Or also, another point that was made is, can we look for the people like Morgan, for example? I really love what Morgan says most of the time. I can't think of a time when I did not like what Morgan said. And so I would love to literally, get to listen to responses or ideas kind of posed by certain people. So, your favorite individuals. But I really like it. And then on top of that, for the people who are old school, if we can call it old school, they have this opportunity to just create the old format of rooms, right? It's still there. It's just not as easy to get to for some people. But it only took me about 2 or 3 days to get used to it. The first day, I hated it, just like a lot of people were complaining about. But then, I think it was second day or third, I was like, wow, I totally get it. I will not rip on Paul and Rohan anymore. I will not complain anymore. I actually like what they did.
That's a great take. I love all that. Yeah, I feel like the more I'm on there playing around with it, the more I'm liking it. When I first was playing around with it last week, when it first came out, I didn't quite get it at first, and the caption wasn't working for me. It looked different than the screenshots Morgan was sharing, but he was on an Android, I'm on an iPhone, but I still just it wasn't clicking for me. But I didn't give up, and I just kept going into it like once a day and play with it a little bit. And I just very quickly was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And now it makes me think like, okay, now that I'm getting the hang of it, what could I do with that? And that to me is always the exciting part. Like, okay, what kind of things can I use this for to be really creative? And definitely getting ideas. Like I just, as I said earlier with Suze, the one Suze put out this morning, like, ooh, what a great idea. Just coming on there and just asking people, what made you smile today is so simple. But also to me, it's like, what a profound conversation to have. Suze, I'm so glad that you did that. I mean, was it just something that just popped in your head, or did you give it some thought?
Do you know what? It was completely off the cuff. I pressed the button and I don't think I even really knew what I was going to say, to the point that I asked the question and then a few people did reply. And as you say, it's such a kind of wide question that I learned things about some people by asking that question. And then I came back and felt like I had to respond to it as well. And then I couldn't think of anything to reply to it. But then that's part of the conversation, right? So, there was no planning. It was completely off the cuff. But I see that it is a kind of a good conversation starter in the end, what makes you smile isn't really what people end up kind of talking about. Morgan's done a fantastic one today as well. He's been traveling, he's been on a plane, he's not in the UK, he's been jet setting about, and he's taken us with him over on Clubhouse. So if you've been following him over there today, some of his chats, we've kind of been alongside journeying with him in his yellow backpack, and it's been great, and I've met Brandon today as well over on Clubhouse, and now he's here in the all things audio space. And that's the beauty of it, making these connections. And as we've said time and time again here, by talking to people, the connection gets very deep, very quick. You've interacted with someone, you've spoken to them, you've kind of, are these my kind of people, that sort of thing. It's a big filter having a conversation with someone, right? Brandon, I see your hand.
No, I wanted to just plus one to what Madalyn said earlier as well. I mean, this platform, all these are free platforms for the most part. I really love that you say that. I mean, I don't know how we can get off on complaining when it's free. I mean, so want to just say that real quick. But secondly, Paul actually warned us right before this change occurred. I can't remember where, and I wish it was available, but he said that this was coming. And then he also warned us that after it would come, that it would be broken and that we would need to give a lot of feedback and ask for how to make it better. And he actually created a convo. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I've tried to put the link in a few different places where you can give him feedback. And I hope he's, listening to all the feedback. A majority of it, unfortunately, like 80% of it is not great feedback. People did not spend the time to actually figure things out. But 20% of it's pretty decent. And on top of that, I think at least we have this ability to give him that feedback that's needed to make this better. I mean, it's in its first week. It hasn't even finished the first week. So, frankly, it's gonna get better. And for the people who want to act like boomers and hate it and just leave, well, so be it. That's just unfortunate. But I think the folks like Madalyn and I think most of the people here, at least from what I can tell, I think we're gonna really appreciate it and enjoy it. And thank you again for the space to even.
No problem. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts. It's great meeting you here, Brandon. Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.